Chapter 18 Biology, Theory Video 18. Another way of protecting endangered species is by assisted reproduction. So this is also a solution for inbreeding. That is, when close relatives of the species interbreed, that is going to be a problem because it might not cause genetic diversity. So, to facilitate breeding, earlier zoos had to transport large mammals from one place to another, which is expensive and time consuming, and it is not practical all the time because sometimes because of this transportation and different changes in their habitat might not always result in breeding. So as a result, what they do is they collect samples of semen and keep them frozen in sperm banks, and then what they do is they actually collect the semen, the sperms, and then they add a medium containing a buffer solution and albumin, and then they store it in very thin tubes known as straws in liquid nitrogen at 196 degrees Celsius. So whenever they are required, what they do is they take these straws and insert them into warm water so the sperm becomes active, and then insert the straw and introduce the sperm into the uterus of the female through the vagina and the cervix. So this is known as artificial insemination. The artificial insemination is required because sometimes there wouldn't be any courtship behavior, and as a result the male and the female would not mate. So to avoid or to prevent that problem from affecting the breeding programs, so they can use this artificial insemination program. And also the uterus, after introducing this into the uterus, there would be a zygote formed, and then the small embryo that is going to be produced will be flushed out of the uterus and would be introduced to another female who has been given hormonal treatment to prepare them for pregnancy. They don't even have to be of the same species. That's another important thing that we need to understand. They could be related but not be an endangered species. So as a result, we can protect these endangered species from the risk of pregnancy, because when you are pregnancy, the mothers are going to be at risk. And also this can result in producing, if there is a healthy female, they can produce many embryos as by using this embryo transfer. So the three key points that we learned are assisted reproduction, that is any technique that is involved in treating infertility, protecting female mammal of an endangered species from the health risk of pregnancy. Then artificial insemination is the injection of semen collected from a male into the uterus. Then embryo transfer is embryos are removed from the uterus of a female mammal of an endangered species, and it should be done shortly after fertilization and would be transferred to a surrogate female to bring to full term. So the surrogate female is the mother who is taking care of or who is receiving the embryo of another mother. So this is used for many wild ox and different species of African antelope, and they have been successfully bred. Then to carry out in vitro fertilization, IVF, eggs or the oocytes are collected from the female's ovaries by using needles, and then what they do is it's mixed in a culture medium mixed with semen. Then a zygote would be produced. Then this embryo that is going to be developed will be cultured outside for several days, and then it will be placed either onto the mother or into several females of the same or different species. So there would be different eggs, different semen, and the many embryos. So these things that are produced will be introduced to the same or different mothers of the same or different species, the surrogates, and we can obtain the full term animal later on. These eggs and embryos also can be stored for a long term. Uh, that can be used at a later stage. Uh, they can be taken back into the process. However, eggs are not easy to be frozen because they can be damaged by the freezing or thawing processes, because it is large. But very small cells, uh, uh, can be cells like the sperm and the embryo, egg, sperm and uh, uh, the gametes can be stored really easily. Eggs are going to be large cells of lot of water, so as a result there would be ice crystals that can damage the membranes. So what happens is they would be fertilized in vitro, and then this would be frozen. There are risks, but it would be frozen until a surrogate becomes available. Then in San Diego Zoo in USA, there is a frozen zoo where they hold the genetic resources in the form of sperms, eggs, embryos, and tissue samples from the many different types of endangered and vulnerable species until they can be used again. For a long period of time, these genetic information can be stored. As a result, they are of high use. Write down a note on this. Assisted reproduction is another method that helps in protecting endangered species. Here, several methods are followed to breed new organisms using artificial insemination. Put a dash and write. Introducing sperm samples into the uterus of a female by using straws containing the sperm. Sperm samples are taken and frozen at 196 degrees Celsius using liquid nitrogen and are thawed when required. The embryo thus formed can also be removed and placed in another female of the same species or another, however they should be related, or another, so that the endangered female is not at risk that comes with pregnancy. This is known as embryo transfer. The female that receives the embryo are surrogate mothers. Another method is in vitro fertilization, IVF, where eggs are collected from female's ovaries mixed with semen, and the resulting zygotes are cultured for several days outside and placed in the mother or in several females of the same or different species. There are frozen zoos, such as in San Diego Zoo, where sperms, eggs, embryos, and tissue samples from endangered species are stored to be used at later stages. Now we come to botanic gardens and seed banks. Now earlier we discussed about animals. Now we are talking about plants. So this is the same thing that helps in the endangered plants. Just like the zoos does for endangered animals. So what we do is we collect seeds or cuttings from collected we collect these cuttings and seeds from endangered plants and build a population at some other place. Later on we will be able to reintroduce them back into the natural habitat. Then also uh, we can actually take small samples of cells and we can grow them on agar in sterile conditions. So they will divide by mitosis, and we can clone these by subdividing them, and then they will be transferred to a medium containing appropriate mixture of plant hormones that will result in these plants growing stems and roots and can be transferred onto soil. These tissue culture and cloning are used to produce large numbers of plants from a few or even one original specimen. So there are many different roles played by a botanical garden. First one is to protect the endangered plant species. So the world's botanic gardens have already cultivated 1/3 of the world's known plant species. So they are increasingly threatened by the wild and by environmental degradation and climate change in the wild, because we result in their loss of habitats. Then we can research different methods of reproduction and growth of these species, and they can be we can facilitate the required conditions and for them to be propagated. Then we can research different conservation methods, so they will have new habitats. We can change them even to get adapted to new habitats if their original habitat is no longer available. Then if they have become very rare or extinct, we can reintroduce these species to habitats where they will again be able to thrive. Then we can educate the public about the many roles these plants play in their ecosystem and their economic value. However, it is not going to be easy to reintroduce a plant species to a new place and ensure its survival, because there can be some plants, they don't spread as rapidly as other plants. Now when you take Sargent's cherry palm, this species were introduced to a botanical garden in Miami, and again later on reintroduced to their natural habitat in Florida Keys. So this was a successful program which was carried out by US botanists. So there are several seed banks which collects and protects the genetic information of these of the different types of trees in the world. There are now there are many different kinds of seed banks. One of the most famous ones is in Norway, which is actually placed there to to help us in a event of mass extinction, or if something happens that destroys or almost all of the earth's trees. Later on, we will be able to replant. If there was someone who survived, we can reach that place and take all the seeds and replant them if the conditions are right. Now, there is a in Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew, UK, there is a place called Millennium Seed Bank, which was started in 2000, and it has an ambition of collecting 25% of the world's plants by 2020. And actually, they have been successful in doing this. Uh, However, there are some shortcomings also that they have come across because of the pandemic also, but they have been largely successful. So even if the plant becomes extinct in the wild, they will be able to reintroduce by using the samples that they have collected. Uh, then there is another Svalbard Global Seed Vault that is run by the government of Norway. It is at the end of a 120-meter tunnel cut into the rock of a mountain on the island of Spitsbergen within the Arctic Circle. So these conditions are thought to be the ideal conditions for storage. They have the doors of this storage unit is only opened during the winter, when the temperature in the surrounding drops to minus 18 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature that it is maintained at. So this started in 2018, and by 2018 the vault had more than 900,000 different seed samples of crop varieties from all parts of the world. There are not there are no, there are only a few countries who do not do that. Almost all the countries, at least there are different organizations collect these seeds, and they store these samples so that they will not be lost forever. So because of the because of if something goes wrong, if everything is lost, we will be able to protect it. So now this Svalbard Global Seed Vaults is actually a very important place, because for whatever happens, if the samples are lost forever, here it will be naturally stored. Whether funding is lost or not, it is going to be naturally stored there. Then Norwegian government is actually responsible for this upkeep of the vault, and it is done free of charge. A new organism can be reintroduced into this. So if you can if you want, you can research these things by applying to the seed bank run by the Norwegian government. They will provide you a sample if you are going to research on this. And also there are different trusts that helps in promoting these plants and these seed vaults, and also they will help introduce or identify new species and send their seeds to these seed vaults as well. Then the International Rice Institute in Philippines, it holds all the rice varieties, the seeds of all rice varieties, and also they continue to produce new varieties so that the yield is going to be higher, and the survivability is higher. Now, if these, if the seeds of these plants, if they are carefully dehydrated, so that they would have only about 5% of water, and if they are stored at around minus 15 to 20 degrees Celsius, minus 20 degrees Celsius, they will actually survive. And also, if the reason why we need to dehydrate them is because now when we dehydrate them, there is less or no ice crystal damage. So so the if now the only way that we can find out if these seeds are good or not is by testing them, by allowing it to germinate. So what they do is, in every 5-year intervals, they actually carry out germination tests. If less than 85% of the seeds germinate, what they do is they take a fresh sample of seeds and they would collect them. So the so what they do when these plants are grown from the samples of stored seeds, there is a possibility of the genetic diversity changing from what was originally stored. So what they do is, when they have only a small sample of what they from the rare sample of the original, they will have problems of developing, having this genetic variation established. So as a result, they will not have all, because it's only a small sample, they will not have all the genetic diversity of the original sample. So what they do is, they have to collect a diverse sample of a lot of seeds and a diverse sample, and store them in the origin as part of the original sample. Most of the seeds are easy to be stored. They can simply be dried and frozen. Then there are there are many different types of seeds that are a little bit difficult to be stored as well. So there are different mechanisms that they have adopted to freeze them and have them stored. So to maintain their genetic diversity, what they do is they have to, there is only one method. They have to make them germinate, and successive generations of plants are to be continued, or else they will have to keep them as tissue culture. The cocoa is banked as trees. So in Cocoa Gene Bank in Trinidad, there are about 12,000 trees, so that they can continue the genetic variation of these plants. I hope you understood. These are just points that you need to understand, like theory. If you have any doubts, please let me know. Write down botanic gardens and seed banks. Just like zoos, botanic gardens play a vital role in protecting endangered species who are in the brink of extinction in the wild. There are several roles a botanic garden has. Number one, protect endangered plant species. Number two, research methods of reproduction and growth so they can be grown in appropriate conditions and reintroduced to relevant habitats. Next one, research conservation methods So the plants can be reintroduced to a new habitat if the original habitat is completely lost. Next one, reintroduce the species to habitats where they have become very rare or extinct. Next one, educate the public of the importance of plants in ecosystems and their economic value. Seed banks such as Millennium Seed Bank in Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, UK, and Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway are examples for places where seeds are stored in appropriate conditions to maintain their genetic diversity and to make sure that they are able to germinate, within brackets viable. They are planted every 5 years to make sure that more than 85% of them remain viable. And also, to increase the diversity, they store increased number of seeds. I hope you understood. If you understand, please do question number 19 and 20, 19 and 20 before we move on to the next video.